You're listening to the Seen and Solved podcast brought to you by Hubbard-Hall. Better results, less chemistry.
So welcome to Seen and Solved, presented by Hubbard-Hall. I'm Tim Pennington, editor at finishingandcoating.com. And today we're going to be speaking with someone you're probably familiar with, but Robin Deal, who is the product manager for Aquapure at Hubbard-Hall. And we have a sort of a wide-ranging topic today. We're going to talk about wastewater equipment, good housekeeping practices, and really what a preventive maintenance program for that equipment should look like. One thing I want to talk about at the top, you and I I think we just finished our second wastewater, or third wastewater treatment user group. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on how that's going so far. I know we had a couple dozen people who signed up for it. I think we had our first meeting it's all Zoom. It's the first Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. Eastern time. We did one in December, just kind of get to know each other. January, we had a little presentation from actually one of our users, members. And then the one we did last week was with Kevin Shropshire, who you got. I thought that was fabulous for him to come in. He's an inspector from the city down in Florida. I thought it was fabulous what he talked about.
I did too. I feel like we get a lot of good questions from our users, a lot of interaction. I hear a lot of positive feedback when I'm out in the field for people who have joined the group. So word is spreading, and I think that it's an awesome way for wastewater operators to connect and discuss issues and troubleshooting their systems with other people who are actually in the field doing what they do every day.
Right. And it's almost a constant troubleshoot sometimes. And I think that's why this group is going to kind of do well going forward, is that you can come there and talk to other people, hear what other users like themselves talk about. So anyway, but again, if people's interested, they can contact Robin or myself, Robin's email address or myself, and we'll get you signed up. It is a closed group. We don't allow people to come in that aren't already signed up. We just want to keep it safe and secure for everybody, and we can talk about anything there. So yeah, like I said, it's the first Thursday of the month, every first Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. So anyway, and again, I appreciate you getting Kevin to come in. I thought that was very interesting, some of the things he talked about from the other side of the fence, right? From the inspector's part, what he's looking for when he's coming in. Some really good information he had. So let's get into this. Let's talk about this. We're talking about equipment and what equipment does a wastewater system have? I'm assuming there's a variety, right? There's a variety based on need, based on how big your systems are and everything. So talk a little bit about that. What are some basic equipment that a system would have?
So you are correct in that there is a variety of sizes of systems, but the basis of each system is always going to be, you have to have some sort of vessel, a tank. You may have one tank or you may have 20 tanks. It just depends on the volume you're flowing and what you're actually accomplishing. Your tanks may be flat bottom or conical bottom. They may be round or square. Again, it depends on what you're doing in those tanks. You have to have good mixing. So most tanks have mixing units attached to them. Some of those mixers are variable speed, so you can adjust the speed of the propellers blending in the water, and some are set. And then you have to have a way to remove the solids from the liquid. So you have to have a dewatering system. And along with that, you have to have various pumps and chemical feeds, pH and ORP controls. Some people get really super fancy and have fully automated computer systems that control everything throughout the wastewater treatment process. And others are very basic. One conical bottom tank, the water goes in, they apply the treatment chemistry in that tank, they settle from that tank, they decamp from the top and run those solids through a plate and frame filter press. Others have clarifiers. Most flow-through systems have some type of clarifier. Incline plate clarifier or a slant clarifier are the terms that you hear. It's all just a way to remove solids.
Because that's the main thing, is that most people that have permits have to remove, they have the metal limits that they cannot go over. So they need somehow to be able to treat that, right, and remove it. If not, as we've heard stories, they get fined by their local wastewater district. They get, they get fined and encouraged to quickly fix the problem. And then that's where the big challenge is how do they fix the problem? And most times I'm assuming it's been something that's probably been going on for a while, and they've not really been, they've either gotten away with it, but sometimes, the numbers go high, but then they are on the clock after that to really fix their system. And they're sort of in a time crunch then sometimes.
We recommend certain things that people can do to make sure their system stays in good health. We'll take an average system, flow-through system. We'll have what's called an equalization tank or an EQ tank. And that's where all of the waters from their plating processes or metal finishing processes commingle so that you get a smooth, typical stream every day. So everything goes into this EQ tank. And we really like to see that tank have vigorous mixing in it. It accomplishes a couple of things. It prevents any solids from settling out in the bottom of that tank. As solids accumulate in the bottom of a tank, the buildup actually causes the flow through to have less retention time because it takes up volume in the tank. So vigorous mixing in that first tank to keep the solids from settling is usually what we ask people to do. And from the equalization tank, it flows into what most people call pH 1, a neutralization 1 tank, where we start introducing coagulants. And again, we ask that there be mixing in that tank. Then from there, it'll flow into a secondary tank where a metal precipitant might be added. Again, vigorous mixing, so rapid mixing. And then from there into a flock chamber where flocculant is added. And that's pretty vigorous mixing. But then we ask that it slows down some to allow time for the flock to build. And then it goes into the clarifier, the lamella, or incline plate, where the solids settle and the clean water goes over the top. So good housekeeping practices are to occasionally drain your tanks and inspect your mixing units to make sure your propellers are still there, that the blades are still there and intact, and doing their job. A lot of times we'll see people haven't cleaned their tanks in years, and when we drain them, it's like a Q-tip there. There's no propeller left.
Right.
So make sure your propellers are still there. And when you drain your tanks, if there's solid buildup on the walls, get it off of the walls to give your tank full volume back. So that's some good housekeeping. We ask that you routinely clean and inspect your pH probes, because pH is such a vital component of what we do in metal removal, that if your pH probe is broken or it's reading inaccurately, your system's probably not running at its best.
You've got tanks, mixers, clarifiers, pumps, pipes, a lot of things, like you said, can wear out, need to be checked. I don't know if a lot of shops do that as a regular maintenance thing. I'd say 50-50 of the shops I see that have full-time maintenance people, right, that walk around and just maintain equipment, all types of equipment. So I guess it really is incumbent upon them to really put it on a schedule, right, of going in and eyeballing and making sure they're checking on all those things that you just spoke about.
Yes, usually a good 6-month schedule every 6 months, which typically falls either July 4th shutdown or Christmas shutdown. Spend a day and really focus on your wastewater system and make sure that your chemical delivery pumps are not leaking, that they're pumping at what the pump rate says they're pumping at. Inspect to make sure that the quills on the ends of the tubing aren't clogged or broken, that they're still in place. And that's for the system, right? So then we get into the dewatering section, which is your filter press. Most people have plate and frame filter presses for their wastewater systems, and routine maintenance of those is inspecting the filter cloths and making sure there's no pinholes or tears in the cloth and replacing those cloths as needed. There's numerous companies out there that sell filter cloths. You can have some made specifically for your size press. It's always a good idea to have backup cloths on hand for those unexpected accidents that do happen.
Right. Well, most accidents I think are expected sometimes because things do wear out, right? I mean, they are going to They're not going to last forever as much as they try to push them through that. But that gets to my next question: is that when do you think how would they know a piece of equipment needs to be replaced? I mean, certainly there's no red light that goes off and says, like my filter at my house, replace this. A lot of it is it eyeball. How do they know when that a piece of equipment needs to be something new needs to be brought in?
Most wastewater systems are designed for a 15-year life. And what we see is we push them in the metal finishing world. I've seen systems that were 50 years old and still very robust and running really well. And that was due to the regular maintenance and upkeep of the systems, routinely changing the filter press cloths, changing out pumps, replacing damaged lines. Things that you can look for is if your pH will not stay calibrated, your pH probe just won't hold a calibration and it's constantly reading off, it's time to replace that probe. If you see a lot of hydroxide buildup and salts on the outside of your hydroxide pump, you probably have some internal leaking and it's time to replace that pump. I have been to facilities and seen it looks like a big salt block sitting there and you can't even turn the dial because there was an internal leak of the sodium hydroxide and it crystallized and it just kept going and kept going and kept going until it encapsulated the entire pump. That's a safety hazard on top of your wasting chemistry. So probably time to replace that pump.
Right. We talk replace, right? And of course, that's something they should be looking at every year. Where does it come into, we don't need to just replace it, we need to probably upgrade what we're doing? What are indications of that something needs to be upgraded for more capacity?
If your system was designed around a 10,000 gallon a day flow, and you've added 2 additional lines or 3 additional lines, or even sometimes in some cases just 1. If you've added manufacturing processes that put more water in your system than it was designed to flow, and so you find yourself turning down your rinses and going to stagnant rinses versus flowing rinses so that your system can keep up, that's a clear sign that you need to upgrade your wastewater system. If you're seeing a lot of solids in your clarifier, and no matter how much you're pumping out through the sludge transfer pump into the sludge holding tank, you're just always getting solids going over your weir, it's probably time to upgrade the clarifier or put in a larger sludge holding tank. I mean, and a lot of people think, well, we'll just slow the rinses down. If we slow the rinses down, we don't have as much water. But the counter side of that is if you slow your rinses down or you stop your rinses, you start seeing quality issues in your plating or your powder coating or your painting. So we don't want that to happen. Really good, robust rinsing flows at 2 gallons per minute for most processes. And it can go up from there. So if you look at how many rinse tanks your manufacturing facility has, a line might have 5 rinses on it flowing into wastewater at 2 gallons a minute. That's 10 gallons a minute per line. Your system needs to be able to handle that flow through.
Are there any kind of tips that you do for you when you're at a facility or if you're talking to a customer, any kind of tips to get them just about keeping the system running smoothly? I mean, that seems to be what they all want, but anything that they can do to just kind of make sure it's all fine-tuned, aside from, shutting it down and taking a complete look at it, what are some things you would recommend?
I always recommend that operators have some kind of log and a daily checklist that they can walk through. The daily checklist can be as simple as, did we calibrate the pH meters and did we empty the sludge filter press? Or it can be as intense as, did we make sure that our motors were turning the right direction in each one of our tanks so that our propellers were turning correctly? Our chemical levels are where they need to be so that we don't have a shutdown. But having some kind of visual daily log that they can check off and do a complete inspection. Is there chemicals leaking at the pumps? Is there sludge holding tank excessively full? It triggers a thought process that says, hey, I need to keep an eye on that pump. It might be time to take that pump offline and service it so I don't have to replace it. Because in a lot of cases, especially with pumps, you can take them offline and rebuild them. They make rebuild kits. And then it extends the life of that pump. Pumps aren't cheap.
Right. I know. Yeah.
They're pretty expensive.
And you're shutting a lot of things down, right? I mean, it's you got to find the right time to do it, and those are always things that it's, again, some shops just don't seem to want to find that time. Sometimes it's hard to do. Either you do it on weekends or what, like you said, during holiday breaks and things like that. But it seems to me that it pays off in the long run from a financial standpoint to look at replacing and look at upkeep and those type of things.
It does. In the long term, it certainly does. We also recommend with a filter press to help extend the life of your filter cloths. We go into a lot of shops that pressure wash their filter press. And what happens is your filter cloths are like any other material. The more pressure you put on that cloth, the weaker it gets. And so we recommend that people put up acid wash systems and pre-coat systems. Acid wash is you just take a little bit of acid, usually 1 cup to 100 gallons, and you run it through your filter press on a recycle system so that it cleans your filter cloths without putting pressure on the cloths and weakening them. Then when you're ready to pre-coat, you use diatomaceous earth and make a slurry, which you run through your filter press, and that diatomaceous earth coats your filter cloths, which protects them from the sludge buildup and polymer buildup that would normally occur. So little things like that most people might not even know that are options because they've always just pulled the plates and pressure washed them. But in the long run, that actually does more damage.
I think one of the first starts is always for every operation is to have someone assigned to do all these things. That's the main thing. It's really got to be top of mind for that, right? I mean, that's one of the things that Kevin was talking about is that when he goes in, somebody signs that certification that they're doing things. That's usually the owner or something. But you want to have somebody in there every day who's really paying attention. They don't have to fool with it every day, but at least it's on their to-do list and their normal job description of doing that. That seems to be something that I think a lot of shops sometimes don't do, and then they kind of get hurt by it sometimes.
Right. It's having one person in charge of your wastewater system really benefits the entire company. It's someone that is responsible for it. And here's another thing that we've seen recently that maybe many people don't realize. When your inspector comes in to inspect your wastewater system, they're not just looking at your wastewater system. If you have unlabeled drums stuck in a corner somewhere full of liquid, you're going to get asked what those are. This law says you only have so much storage available for waste. And if it's not properly labeled and in the proper location, you're going to get questioned about it. And if you can't prove what it is and why it's there, you're probably going to get a fine. So make sure that everything in your wastewater area and everything in your facility is properly labeled and at places where it's supposed to be at.
Right. Yeah, definitely with that. And that's one thing I think Kevin mentioned the other in that conversation, which I hadn't even put 2 and 2 together to know that that's something he'd be looking for as well. And that, but with all this, like I said, I think it's a good, again, we talked at the beginning, I think it's a good reminder people can join us on a monthly basis with their peers. I think the last meeting we had 25 or over 25 people, shops that showed up. So again, want to invite people to come to the wastewater user group. Robin's there to help answer any technical questions and kind of navigate. But thank you, Robin. This has been great information again. I've learned some things. I always do talking to you. Thank you very much for that. So
I always enjoy talking to you, Tim.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again. Thanks to Robin for joining us today on Hubbard-Hall Seen and Solved. And you can visit hubbardhall.com to watch past episodes. And we hope to see you very soon.
Thanks, Tim.
The Scene in South podcast is brought to you by Hubbard-Hall. For more podcasts, visit hubbardhall.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to like and subscribe, rate and review, and join us on social media. Produced by Allcast.